the bottom of it with your host, Joshua Moriarty.
Hello, happy new decade. How is everybody? Pleasure to be back, welcoming in the 20s of the future. Wow, what a wild time to be alive. It's been a little minute since my last episode / confession. I had a break over Christmas and just starting to get into the swing of things for the new year now. Jesus, it takes a while to readjust. You want a holiday because, you know, the year before wears you out, but then starting the new one is a total head fuck. It's been very confusing. I've been feeling quite out of it, but I think today is the first day that I'm now starting to get on top of what the hell it is that my life is. Anyway, enough about that. But I've spoken to a few other people who have been going through a similar thing. So guys, you're not alone if you want to feel better about it. Today's guest, anyway, into it, here we go. Today's guest is producer extraordinaire Tony Buchan. Now, I love Tony. He's bloody excellent. I've known him for quite a few years now. We met working on a Miami Horror single back in 2014 for the Miami Horror Train Spotters out there. It's the song Wild Motion, if you know that one. We worked with him at a studio in Sydney at the time, and him and I hit it off. He's just a cool dude. I just really like Tony's vibe, but I didn't really see him much after that, I don't think. It wasn't until he moved to LA that we sort of reconnected, and since then he's actually been producing my new Joshua Moriarty solo record, album number 3. He's been so fantastic to work with. Not only is he an excellent producer and arranger, but he's also a badass musician, can play the shit out of the flute. He gets red hot on the lead bass. You name it, Tony can do it. He's been in the biz for a long time. He did the Australian circuit playing in his band, The Bagsmen, formerly known as The Hive. They were doing all the festivals and whatnot in the early 2000s. He's played a lot. He worked closely with Tim Finn, playing bass in his band and working in the studio. He's worked on records for Courtney Barnett, The Preachers, Montaigne. He's currently working with James Iha from the Smashing Pumpkins. Tony's been in LA for about 3 years now, doing excellent work with some brilliant artists. The people that he has around him and the players that he gets to come in to work with are all super cool and super talented. I love what Tony's doing as a producer. So yes, we had a chat when I was there recently. We switched seats in the studio where I'm usually the subject on the couch and he's producing me. I asked him if I could take the producer seat and let Tony relax on the couch, and we got chatting all things bottom of it style. We talk about the creative process, but obviously we talk about it with a slight hint of cynicism. You'll see when we get into it. We talk about authenticity. We talk about how to legally define your sort of intellectual property and the musical lawsuits that have been going on. We talk about trying to regress in the studio and unlearn things so you can create freely with a more childlike mind and approach. It was a great chat. I think Tony's wonderful, and it's been a pleasure to work with him this last year, and it's great to share this conversation with him with you. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. No more chit chat. Let's get into it. Episode whatever it is, I can't even remember what it is. You'll be able to read it. Episode blah blah with Tony Buchan. Enjoy. Yeah, I saw you playing that on Instagram the other day. Whoa.
Perfect timing. There you go.
What is that?
This thing is called a tremoloa. It's a bizarre instrument. It's so difficult to describe and not see it. But
I'll have to take a photo and show it to the listener.
It's basically in the 50s. There were all these companies that made these instruments that people could play at home and sort of feel like they actually had a modicum of like talent and could perform classic songs of the era themselves rather than just listen to them on playback on records. So this is one of those, player instruments, but it's a really unusual one because it it's copying like a Hawaiian slack guitar kind of sound, because Hawaiian music in the 50s became quite popular, and a lot of it made its way into, you know, like exotica music.
Yeah.
You know, soundtracks and Elvis films that were set in the islands and the South Pacific and all that. And it became quite a sort of, you know, a sound du jour in the 50s.
Where did you find it?
I can't tell you, because then everyone's going to get on. It's like there's an eBay out there, but
Oh,
it's
there's
like
a place.
eBay. It's like eBay in 2000.
Whoa.
And it's ridiculous.
It's like some dark web shit.
For a good cause. That's a clue. That's perfect music for what we're talking about.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm fascinated by your instrument. Well, yeah, there was a guy who came to play
Yeah.
pedal lap steel thing with Mariki and I
Yeah.
the other day.
Who?
Oh my god, I'm suffering from
Was it lap or pedal?
pedal, because that's got the volume swells,
Yeah,
right?
man, pedal's the dark. I mean, you can put a lap still through it, but pedal's the proper dark arts.
Yeah, I was absolutely beguiled by this guy and him playing that instrument. I couldn't believe it.
It's one of those things you go, yeah, I could do that. And
I
then you
don't.
try.
I don't know. I know.
You can't even.
No, I wouldn't even know where to begin to do that.
It's crazy, because sometimes you sort of move in one direction and the sound actually goes the other direction, because you're suppressing a pedal that then, you know, puts more tension on some strings, and then it's
yeah, not only
bizarre.
is there the hands and the pitching or the footwork, but then you push your knee against the bar to
That's right.
change all of the pitch and stuff. At the
Yeah, to
same.
do like I think you do that for diminished chords and stuff.
I couldn't believe it.
Something.
But
I shouldn't say this because I actually don't know.
Oh,
Sound
that's
like
okay.
I'm an authority on it, and I actually don't know anything about.
I don't know
how it
anything
works.
about it. It's one of those ones. No, he said, "Do you want to have a turn?" And I said, "Absolutely not. I'm not interested at all. You've
Yeah.
just played it beautifully. The fuck am I going to do with it?
Absolutely.
Just like slide my hand up and down it." Mariki had a turn because she's good like that. She
Yeah.
doesn't care. I
Yeah.
remember she has art attack night at her house, and she invites people over and they just paint and draw and have fun with art.
awesome.
But I couldn't really do it. I was there for one of them, and I had the blank piece of paper. I was like, "But what do I do?" She's like, "Oh, just have fun, just do stuff." I'm like, "What do you mean?"
yeah.
I can't really. I don't
It's
have
not
that.
for everyone, but it is for everyone. I mean, everyone, I guess, could get something from that experience of just doing something that they're not necessarily good at. Do you know what I
think
mean?
I hate being not good at things, and if I'm not good
Yeah.
at them, I don't even.
But that's the point, isn't it?
I don't bother. I know, but I've
Yeah.
got to. It didn't work for me. So I picked 3 colors. It took me 10 or 15 minutes to pick the exact 3 colors, and then I think I just drew some eyes with a red bit in it, and it was just really clean and
Right.
simple. And then I
Right.
looked over at hers, and it's just like watercolors and clouds, and she's just
Wow.
having a good time.
Wow. Well, there's a lot to that.
There was, yeah. I think that's why I like working with her, because
Yeah.
I'm
She's
very anal.
open
And, yeah,
and
she's
free.
open. Yeah, exactly.
And you're anal.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I can't help myself.
There's a lot to that in the sense of, and I think about this all the time. In the studio, you find yourself purposefully regressing and kind of putting yourself in a sort of naive state where you're almost playing from this childlike place, where you're not playing from a place of knowledge, things that you know that you should do or
You know
can
lots of
do.
stuff as well, don't you? You've
Well,
spent-
that's the thing. I'll get there, but even though you know all this stuff and you've spent your entire career learning and becoming a good musician or a producer, whatever, often you got to unlearn that stuff to open the gateways of creativity to actually make something that's truly original, which is often the goal, is to make a sound that isn't just referential, but to actually create new territory. And you can't always do that, obviously, but the best chance to do it is to open yourself to this sort of more childlike state. And but then again, there's another theory that says, no, fuck that. Like, keep learning, keep getting as good as you can at what you do, and that within that you can still access this naivete. So I'm in this process right now of like really dumbing down a lot of the ways I play in the studio, but it's not really dumbing down. It's more like refining.
Do you find it tricky to do that?
I've got to a place where it's really easy for me to do it now.
Great.
And I have a process, but I get anxiety that, does that mean that I'm not learning anymore, that I'm not progressing as a musician? Because that's important too. So that's what I'm getting at is like, there's a sort of paradox there. You know, you want to keep getting better, but if you keep reducing what you do, and this is a big difference between studio musicians and live musicians. I feel like if you play in a totally reductionist fashion like you would on record live, it's a bit boring.
Mm-hmm.
You do have to go there when you play live. So when I go out and play a live show, it's a completely different headspace. And it's really hard to go from a day in the studio and go and do a gig. It's really tough.
You were saying that last time. You said even just remembering the changes is really difficult now because you've got so many songs in your brain.
So many songs. Like right now, there's probably, I don't know, like 12. No, there's an album plus 2 or 3 singles I'm working on. Like there's 14 songs going around my head at the moment. So if I had to go out and play a set with 10 songs, it's just a lot of brain space, you know.
Yeah.
So it's lame, but I often play with charts like next to my pedals because I'm like, well, I don't trust myself because I get, 4 bars from the bridge and I'm like, fuck, what? Oh yeah,
I'm starting to feel the same way.
I just need to glance at something.
Yeah, just think because otherwise, where are you going to go, man?
Yeah, it's a bit lame because I hate seeing musicians read charts on stage. I want them to be present, So
yeah, but that's like more of a session gig kind of thing that you're doing anyway, right? It's not like you're playing in the band all the time. You're getting invited to play with people for certain things.
Yeah, that's right. But that's right. It's not my music that I'm
exactly.
playing. So when it's your music, I always marvel at artists. I look at them and I'm like, how the fuck how do they know so many changes in this set without even thinking about it and all the lyrics? And then I realize, but this is what they do.
Yeah, it's their song. They play it night after night.
That's it. The 12 songs is their whole world, artistically speaking. So I give myself a bit of a pass.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's okay.
I got this Miami Horror gig on Saturday, and I haven't been playing with those guys. They're on tour without me at the moment, but I'm joining them in Mexico. And I'm a little worried about it. But then I was just sort of blasting through a few of the songs last night, and I realized, my fingers and my body and my feet know exactly what to do to press the right pedal and play the guitar part. Because we played them for fucking 7 or 8 years before.
Right.
They're just completely innate now. I couldn't tell you the words.
Yeah.
But as soon as it gets to the time where it's the moment to sing, they just come out of you because of
people use that term muscle memory. It's such a good term because it's like you can forget it, but it's always there. You just need to re-access the memory.
Totally.
And the muscles have to just go, that. And then it's also a physical thing.
I think so.
As well as a mental exercise.
That's funny what you're saying, though, about unlearning or whatever. I think I've said this before. There's this, I think it was a Picasso quote that I remember on someone's bathroom wall about him saying he spent 10 years learning to paint like the particular masters from one era, another 10 years learning to paint like so-and-so, and then his entire life learning to paint like a child.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, like all this shit we talk about creativity. Like, creativity is such a trendy subject right now. There's so many books on it and podcasts and just so much content about creativity and the creative process. And it feels like corporations have sort of co-opted the whole notion of creativity and are trying to get their employees to feel like they are creative souls. And I'm sounding really cynical about it.
No, because I'm with you. I kind of agree.
But it's like, this shit isn't new. What you just said, Picasso had discovered all this stuff already, and I think if you go back as far as you want, you'll find this creative spark about the unlearning and all of that stuff. But the unlearning thing, it could be really a feature of the postmodern world when you think about it.
Sure.
Because up to that period, whenever it is, like the 60s, I suppose, onward, there was this notion that if you're going to be an artist, you got to be good. Mm-hmm. And good meant technically good, right? Or if you're going to be, actually, that's not true in terms of art because, modern art started way before the postmodern way of thinking. But there's that notion that, yes, to be an artist, you had to be very good at what you do technically. And then through these different periods of art and creativity, whatever, these things were like all like, it was unlearnt. It was like saying, no, it's not about doing things properly anymore. It's just about expression, and, the painting's so amazing like that, like impressionistic painting. I find that so interesting when you think about impressionism in terms of a musical thing. It's kind of like impressionism is kind of what we're all doing now. We're all trying to like paint sort of impressions of things.
I think what sometimes bothers me or irks me is people who are using the I haven't studied anything as a way to like seem like, well, they're like, well, Jimi Hendrix never knew any theory or something like that. It's like, yeah, but he was fucking excellent. He probably played however many hours a day working really, really hard on his craft. People use their lack of commitment or ability like it's a cool thing, and that's not the way out. It doesn't suddenly mean that you're good. I heard Jim Root from Slipknot on Song Exploder the other day.
Wow.
And he's...
I've got to listen to that.
Yeah, it was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I never bothered learning theory because an augment of this, a fifth of this, it would just get in the way of creativity. And I'm like, I don't know, bro. I don't think that's always the fucking way. It's not like you can still learn things and it's not going to suddenly restrict you. It sort of feels like a crutch or something.
Yeah.
Not always though, because for some people it does
because
really
it works
work.
for him. That's his thing, and it
but I've seen other people
probably
over the years who have been like that. And
it's not a universal truth.
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
it's true for some people, and I think like if you're a punk musician, for instance, I think it's really interesting when punk musicians, halfway through their career suddenly start actually learning all the augmented fifths and shit, and then start making the most ridiculously amazing music. So that's a good example of where, you can like go both ways for sure. But back to that Jimi Hendrix example, we're living now in a postmodern world because it's like, Jimi Hendrix, it's like that, Malcolm Gladwell idea of 10,000 hours. He kind of nailed it for our times to explain.
Is he the one who came up with that? Is that his, or he just kind of
put it
in his book?
It's like, I think Malcolm Gladwell's brilliant. Like I love him and I read his articles. I've read some of his books. But really, I don't think he comes up with original ideas. He's just really good at perfecting them. Just like Thomas Edison with the light bulb. He didn't invent it. It was actually invented in Europe before that, like 50 years before or whatever, by two people independently, but at the same time, because the technology was developing. But then he perfected it. It's like Malcolm Gladwell's like that. He's a great aggregator of ideas, and then just goes, "No, here it is in a capsule." And I think that 10,000 hours is a good example of that. But when I was growing up, I did the 10,000 hours, but Malcolm Gladwell explained it. But when I was doing it, I didn't acknowledge that. I didn't think I was doing anything. I just did it. And I think that's the difference between then and now, even from growing up in the 80s and 90s, and now where you have the internet with everything on it. There's this thing where people, I feel like kids coming up have this like sort of framework that we just didn't have as much of back then, I think.
Of course, yeah.
There's this framework. It's like, okay, if you want to learn how to do this, you just watch the video and then you learn how to do it, rather than just sort of improvising. Like I just felt like I was just improvising so much of the time, not really knowing what the hell I was doing. And I feel like a lot of people coming up at that time were doing that same thing. You're just sort of stumbling on things rather than being shown how to do it. And the creative process too. Now there are like hundreds of books on the creative process. You can learn the creative process. But like the other way to do it is to actually not learn it. Just let it happen in an organic way, And
I would never call myself a creative. I'll keep getting on with doing whatever it is I do.
Right.
But I think that word has become trendy where people are like, yeah, well, I'm a creative, so blah, blah, blah. I'm like...
Yeah, I find that a bizarre
just fucking...
say.
Yeah, but people do, I guess.
A creative.
It's
a really weird noun.
Yeah, well, we're creatives, so, us creatives, this is just how we are. I'm like...
Yeah. Well, that's
just
why...
shut up
that's
and get
why,
on with it, Dick.
I think authenticity, that word, is like really valued now in the culture and in business and in music, in art, everything. And it's because there's a lot of fake shit out there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's more
Absolutely.
fake shit. And I think in the past, probably like just the authentic stuff, a lot of it became successful just because it was authentic. And yeah, the authentic stuff rose. But now there's so many avenues. There's a lot of fake stuff out there too.
That's what you're looking for when you're choosing to produce somebody? Authenticity, that's a huge part of it for you?
Yeah, I don't think of it in those terms. Like I don't go, oh, that's authentic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, they're creative.
It's
Let's
that
get them
thing
in.
where you just feel it in your gut. You know, it's that you have to just, and it's always in the first like few minutes.
Yeah.
You're never going to be convinced after like hours of work. You know, you just know. And it's, you know, in any area of work you do, whether it's a creative space or
Well, let me tell you, being a creative,
yeah, being
an authentic creative.
being a creative myself, I think I'm entitled to say. But, you know, you can be a doctor or a lawyer, whatever. You get instincts, you know. All these people in whatever walk of life, whatever profession, whatever you do in your life, like you just, after doing it for a long time, have this really honed kind of instinct for things. And just as a lawyer will have a client walk in the room and within a few minutes know if it's going to be a nightmare or a winnable thing or they're innocent or whatever it is that they're looking for, it's the same in music that you know, I think you get a sense very quickly the scope of something.
So you sort of, people invite themselves over, you invite them in, you sit and you feel it out for a session or two, and then you kind of decide afterwards whether you're going to pursue working with them. How do you break up with them if you're not going to, sorry, I'm too busy, guys?
Well, the door doesn't usually open, I think. Like, it's very rare that you get into it and then you go, you know what, nah. I mean, it does happen, but
I imagine now it's probably people know who you are and you know who they are, and it's
That's
probably
right.
a lot easier.
Yeah.
But starting out, was it like that? Where sometimes you needed to take the money over, there would be a tricky balance perhaps?
I was always pretty, I don't want to sound pretentious about
No,
it,
it's
but
all
just
good.
uncompromising, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I just was like,
That's not
I
pretentious at all.
I don't want to put myself through this situation, and I don't think it's going to be the best
yeah,
the
for
artist,
the person you're
for
working
you,
with.
for either of it. So
exactly.
there's no point putting yourself. You know, that's the thing. When I hear people having lawsuits against each other because you didn't want to, you know, you didn't fulfill. Like, I'm like, why would you go there? You know, if it's not meant to be, it's just not meant to be. And if someone steals your intellectual property, that's different. But I do hear these stories of people, you know, wanting to fight the battle. You know, it's just like, why would you want to fight to make music? I don't.
Yeah, of
It should
course.
never be like that, you know.
Yeah, I don't mind tension, obviously.
Sure, within the process, you fight for ideas.
Yeah.
But fight for the very session itself. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
It shouldn't be like that. That's
In
not-
terms of intellectual property, then, with some of these, okay, what's the most recent one? Ed Sheeran being sued by the Marvin Gaye estate for that song of his that sounds like "Let's Get It On." I forget what his one is. Should he be losing money? Do you think it's bullshit? Are we all just borrowing off each other? And you know, where do you draw the line with that?
Yeah, well, the line, it appears, has been drawn more towards the protection of older ideas, it seems, in the last 10 years or whatever. And that is a dangerous thing because music, as a cultural artifact, has always been based upon what came before it.
Yeah.
So there's no new, not unlike what you were saying before, you know, there's nothing new under the sun, et cetera, et cetera. And it's important that there's this organic process of building upon, you know, I mean, everyone was referencing someone.
Yeah, always. Especially someone like Marvin Gaye. I don't feel like he wasn't ripping anyone else off or
Yeah.
stealing anyone
I
else's.
mean, nearly
like-
every one of early Dylan songs is just based on chord progressions from wherever it may have
Yeah.
come from. Woody
So if-
Guthrie or Appalachian music or whatever. It's like, what are you going to do? Say, well, you were stealing, but like, you know, but he came through this folk tradition, so contextually it was different. But it seems in the pop music world, it's become more tighter. There actually is a more recent example of Lizzo. I don't know if you heard about that.
I have. Mariki was maybe telling me about Lizzo with with Justin Raisin and those
yeah,
guys?
yeah. I don't know those guys personally, but
Well, I
after
don't know
they
what-
told that, some people told me about it, and I looked into it and listened to the music, and I do understand both sides of that situation. I went back and I listened to their original demo, and then I listened to the final
Had
track.
they worked with her? Is that what it was?
Yeah, yeah, they had worked with her, and she had come up with a line while reading a tweet from someone, and that's the central line to the song, and it's a great quote. So she quoted the tweet, but it came up in this session, and there was a total vibe in that session. It was a good energy, and then I'm not sure what happened to that demo, but then she went and worked on her final record later, whether it was years later. I don't know. It was like a year later or something. I don't know the time. I don't know the fine details of it. But then during the session for her album, she was working with someone else, and she's like, oh, I've got this line, and brought that line over from the other track. But the vibe of this new track, it definitely has some similarities to the demo that she did with those other dudes when she wrote that line.
Yeah.
And my thing has always been, when that happens in sessions that I've done, writing sessions, is always like, oh, look, just pay like a sort of like goodwill gesture to the original session.
I'm with you on that.
Because creativity, it doesn't just happen in isolation. When you're in the room with someone, there's so many reasons that ideas flourish in that context, and that anyone in that room needs to get acknowledged. Otherwise, you can just be really ego-y about it and just go, no, I wrote it. He's like, yeah, but I suggested the chord that inspired that line.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
you're singing over. It's like it didn't come out of purely out of the ether. It came out of a and that situation is everything in music making and writing music. Like, that's what it is. So to not give that acknowledgement to me is like, I get it. Like, as an artist where you've gone, no, I just got it off a tweet and I sung it with my attitude. Absolutely, she's right. She did.
But
It's about acknowledging just
it would
that
not
previous.
have existed if they hadn't had that session together and they were all bouncing
That's
those
right.
ideas. You wouldn't even have that in the
Exactly.
first place. Yeah.
And you don't have to give 50%, but just they were only asking for a very small percentage, and I think that that's the right thing to do in those situations. For sure.
Fascinating.
And it feels to me like I don't blame her at all, because I feel like she probably just doesn't realize that, and it's really the people around her who know this stuff really should just be advising her to go, oh, look, just do the right thing. Just be cool.
Yeah.
But that's clearly not what happened. It was very adversarial.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't looked into it. Mariki mentioned it to me because she knows those guys.
Yeah. And we've all had those moments. And when they happen, I'm always like, I'm just going to meditate on it and let it go. Because what's it going to do? Fighting it. What's it going to do? It's just not going to make, that some people may say that's lame because, no, you should fight the good fight, whatever. But in music, I just find that it's just never worth it. Even if you do get your 5%, it's just not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, for 5% sometimes, and like a huge row and a falling out. It's
Yeah,
like, let's
yeah.
just, we cool.
Yeah.
I think it was, even Kean, the guy across the road who I was talking, was just in the studio a moment ago. He worked with Eric Valentine, that producer who did that Queens of the Stone Age big record and some other stuff. And his thing was always, whenever I would keep asking for more bounces or just little mix tweaks or anything, he said Eric had told him, just always just do it for the artist. Just like, even if they're bothering you and it's going a little too far, sometimes he's like, just be cool. Just make them happy, and then they'll kind of want to keep working with you or create a good vibe.
That's a truism.
Yeah.
I think of
Yeah,
this
I know.
business. And there's a lot of books and managers and everything that'll just tell you, no, you got to do it by the hour, and and just sometimes you got to be loose. You just have to be loose. Although that requires a common understanding, and sometimes, like I think in the Lizzo case, like that understanding wasn't there. I don't think she understood that, and
Yeah,
it's not
also
her
I guess
fault.
if you haven't been around, she may not do that again in another 5 years because you learn from it. Because there would have been things that I would have done definitely 5 or 10 years ago, studio situations, things that I might have tried to claim were mine. And if you haven't been doing it for long enough, I guess you'll just make those mistakes sometimes, won't you?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, as an artist, you then, after that adversarial encounter, have to soften because the next time you're in the studio writing, you don't want to be plagued by thoughts of, oh, maybe I shouldn't sing this because someone will steal the idea. That is bullshit.
Absolutely.
That is the exact negation of the creative process.
Yeah.
So if you're there, then you've lost big time. So that is, you just want to get over that stuff. That's why I'm saying like the adversarial thing. It's just like it usually results in some kind of, in the long run, in the long game, it's a negative.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of that is ego-driven as well, like you're talking about. I mean, it's cool sharing and doing things with other people and all being in on it together a little bit, isn't it? Don't you think that's how I always
it's
feel
always
about
a
it.
more joyful process,
Yeah.
and I feel like it kind of puts this injection of like maybe a better chance at success too, if you're just cool about stuff. I don't know, I really believe that.
I've been, definitely trying way more as well, just to let go of a lot of things that invite more people. I mean, I've been enjoying working with you, and I'm bringing you even lazier demos now because I want you to be able to help me with doing it, because otherwise it's like I could sit there by myself for hours and hours and hours and go over and over and over it. But there's such a joy in sharing music with other people and getting them to sort of facilitate for you.
Yeah. I've honestly come to a place, because I definitely didn't used to think like this, by the way. So much of what we're talking about, 10 years ago was just like I was in a very different headspace, musically speaking. But I really have come to this place where, the more talented people in the room, just the more fun it is and the better it is.
Yeah, totally.
It's like collaboration is what makes music really rich, and there's very few albums that have been made in a solitary space that are great, unless you're talking about like a Brian Eno kind of like minimalist thing.
Yeah, I agree. There's not many. Or
it doesn't have to be multiple musicians. It can be a solo artist, but like with a great producer, great engineer, great, team.
Well, I like that about what you do. I like that. I feel like, that's an old school sort of production mentality that's not necessarily as... Well, I guess there's a lot of people now who are calling themselves producers, and I'm not saying that they're not. It's just the word has changed, hasn't it?
That's right.
Like if you're good at using Ableton or Logic or making beats, you're a producer. But I like that you get the person. You're like, right, well, we need to get drums that sound like this. I got the guy. Let's call him up. Let's get him to come into the session.
Yeah.
I don't feel like as many people have that.
Yeah, it's just two different things. Like you said, the word has changed. So the word producer now can be the old school kind of, notion of being a producer, which I guess I fall into that category. But, so it's about bringing musicians together, casting the room, choosing the right people for the right moments, and also being able to create sounds using gear and, engineer the session too, which has become part of the role of a producer more than it used to be. So I'm not like totally old school in that sense. I'm definitely a producer of our times, I think, because, we're living in times where most producers have their own studios and their own gear. And back in the day, it was more like, the producer just walked into a big studio, empty space, and just, everyone brought their gear, or they had cartage companies and hire companies, and it cost a fortune because there were budgets. You'd bring in like 5 drum kits and all that kind of shit. That stuff's happening less and less. So now it's more like this space that we're sitting in right now, which is my studio in LA. It's like, and that's why so many records you hear coming out now have really tight drum sounds, like not as roomy, not as open. This is a function of the economics of music in a way that's forced everyone into these more bedroom style environments. But it's awesome. Like it's creating something great. But then you have producers who are like, just might have a laptop and work in their bedroom, and they are called in the industry and on radio, that artist is a producer, they'll say, which means that they're a self-produced artist, usually doing beats kind of driven music in Ableton. That's kind of what that means.
Yeah, I know.
And that is someone that's different to a producer who has 20 drummers in their contacts list in their phone, to choose from, and they'll use one just because they're going for a particular snare sound on a particular. It's very, it's a different thing.
Does it bother you that that word gets used for the person who just is 15 years old in their underpants making something on
It's
there?
like what we were just talking about. If I let my ego take over, I could. It's in me to get bothered by it,
Yeah.
but I just don't let it.
Yeah.
Because I want to sometimes work with those people, and I
Yeah,
don't
sometimes
care
they're really great.
Call yourself whatever you want, you know.
Yeah.
And I always say to artists, when an artist says, "Look, I'd like a co-production, like credit on this record," and I'm like, okay, if you feel that's necessary, then
Yeah.
because every artist is really co-producing themselves, like they're not just sitting there being told what to do all day.
Yeah, of
They are
course.
sharing in the process. It's not about what you did; it's about how you want to be credited.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes down to, I feel like, something else, like call it ego or whatever it is. But there's no point arguing it. It's like, okay, if you feel that you need that, then that's a feeling that I'll acknowledge.
I think I that's one I'm really starting to let go of, wanting to feel like my name should be involved in the producer side of things. The more I'm like, nah, fuck, who cares?
Yep.
I don't
Now,
know.
if you ask me for my honest, deep feeling about it, that's how I feel, is that it'll benefit you as an artist if you relinquish
Yeah, totally.
that desire to feel the need to be credited.
Yeah, I
It's
think
not
it was
about the
ego.
credit. It's about the feeling that that is engendering that request, right? So if you let go of that, where are you? And I think that the artist is then like, oh, I'm just the artist, and I'm here standing on this mountain. Produce me, and it elevates you to this status. I think it takes you into a much higher status than trying to do everything.
I think that's why I've been enjoying working with you here, is because it's the first time I've sort of completely embraced that. And it's sort of a new thing for me to actually just sort of let go a
Right.
lot more and trust someone to do
Well, it's
that.
that thing, I take the artist really seriously.
Yeah.
You should take yourself really seriously. You know what I mean? Like that's, and a lot of artists don't, because a lot of artists will come in, there's that battle. You just think you're shit. We all think we're shit from time to time. We've done a bad job, and, it happens all the time, And while as a producer, you have to put up a sort of front of confidence. Often I'll leave the studio and I'll sit behind my wheel of the car driving home and kind of scream because I've been holding in this shit all day. Like, I just didn't do a good enough job. I know I screwed up. And then, the next day you'll get an email back from the artist saying it sounds amazing. And you're like, why did I put myself through that? But
That one's a funny one. Yeah, the not giving yourself the time to just let it be, sit back, and then wait 2 days until you listen to it again and go, oh, we actually did do a great job.
Right.
It's like you can really just start hating on yourself very,
yeah,
very quickly.
Exactly. It is about giving yourself just that space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one I've suffered with a lot. I may be getting a little bit better at sort of letting that go. But yeah, if you start stifling things straight away because you just go, I'm fucking it up, I'm not doing a good job, it will just never, ever turn into anything.
Oh, absolutely. In terms of the creative process of being in the room, I mean, I'm just a firm believer of that process of being like, don't worry about the first or second or third step. Just do them.
Yeah.
Because you need to do them to get to that fourth thing, which
Yeah,
is going to
yeah.
be the thing.
Yeah,
And you'll never get to
absolutely.
the thing that's actually saying something unless you actually take those steps. It's like, just mess it up. Like, do something stupid. Like, just, I don't know, do whatever. Just
Yeah.
do anything to just open the gateway. But again, like, not everyone will end up somewhere good. That's when taste, skill, experience, like what experience have you lived in your life? What experience do you have as a record maker? Like all of those things start coming into play within those steps from one to the other and those decisions that you make. So it's not just some airy-fairy, farty process. It's
No,
like,
no,
no,
of
take the
course
step,
not.
but then, we'll know if you're any good at step 4 because,
How long have you been in LA now?
3 years now.
3 years.
3 and a bit, yeah.
I feel like you turned up when I sort of just said I was going to live here, and then now I don't really live here anymore.
Right.
It must have been around the same time, wasn't
3
it?
years is a weird time.
How's it? How are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I mean, everyone asks me that question. It's funny. How are you enjoying LA? It's
Well,
an
no, I
interesting
guess
question.
I'm just thinking more so of changing your environment, changing studio, obviously probably changing sort of some of the people that you're working with.
Totally.
Having
I know it was a really dicky answer to that.
No, I know,
Very
and it's more
reasonable question.
more so than the city. I think just
Yeah.
the I think musical history, the people that you have
Oh,
the ability
totally.
to work with, all
Absolutely.
of that, more so than like, does the traffic bother you? Like, I
yeah,
don't really care about that.
absolutely. All those things you just listed are the reasons that I came
Yeah,
out here.
yeah, I think so.
But
We've
once you're
talked about it.
here, I find that you don't think about that stuff anymore. You're just here and you're doing it. And the expectation, if you're going to work at any reasonably, like sort of any reasonable level here with good people, is like that stuff can't be a big deal. Like don't get sucked into the like, oh, this console, Fleetwood Mac snorted coke
Did you know
off
that
the
this?
fetus.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
This
There's-
was actually on Pet Sounds. The amount of time.
Feel the feeder. There's chicken grease in there because like Jaco Pastorius would eat chicken. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like none of that is going to make you
Totally.
make better music today. In this situation. So it's been a process of like, yeah, all of that stuff really mattered to me before I moved out here. I was excited and like all of that, but now it's like, okay, that's all gone, and it's like make decisions only from what's going to be best for this situation, what's going to be best for the artist, what's going to be, and often even like right now, I got to do a drum session next week, and I'm like, okay, I want a more open drum sound. I want it to be open and a bit bombastic, and I'm drawn to like, oh, maybe I should go to United or Sunset and do the big, classic room and these more open sounding, beautifully designed rooms. And it's like, okay, but are you doing it because you're drawn to the space? And then there's that whole mystique that you do, the artist and the label, everyone's like, oh, they recorded at Sunset, but none of that shit matters.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's about, okay, just forget that, forget the names, just think, okay, what's the drum tone that you're going for? And what's the atmosphere, and then withdrawing back into that. So you're kind of confronted by those things every day in a way. It's interesting.
In Australia, was there the same facilities available, to get all of those sounds, or it's definitely more limited? Didn't really
Yeah, I
make
mean, a
any-
lot of studios have closed in Australia, the big older studios, which had those kind of rooms. I found in Sydney, where I'd work most because that's where I was based, there were a few rooms that I got used to, but nothing was ever kind of just right. There were always some limitations. Either the room was really vibey and there were tons of instruments and it was really cool, eclectic gear, but there was like janky stuff. Like every channel that you plugged in wouldn't kind of work for 10 minutes and
I'm
you had to
imagining
fight
some of
through
these
it. And that
places.
kind of thing, I have lost a lot of patience for that because now in terms of I just want to move fast. I know what I want to hear and I want it quickly. So my thing is now send the setup sheet the night before and I just tell the assistant, just let me know. Let me know when to get there. I want it all patched and line checked.
Nice.
And so I can just start painting immediately, immediately start carving EQ, setting gain, placing mics. So that's my thing. And it's funny because a lot of people still don't understand, no matter how specific you are about it, you'll get there and there's still an hour and a half of patching to go. I'm like, no, I meant it. Do it. It's in your hands. Go for it, Yeah.
That's even just like live gigs, though, when you send the advances of everything that you need. You tell them
It's
on.
just
you
part of that. Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
let go to an extent, for sure.
Yeah, they're always like that.
For sure.
The other, I guess, also about LA, though, you with moving your kids here, and how has it been difficult for them? Speaking to Frank Tita, saying that he's taken his family back home because of weird, fucking gun shooter drills at his high school, freaking his kids out, and that sort of anxiety. Do you feel that here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. There's a lot of times here where I feel like getting, with the kids, I feel like getting the other parents at the school together and the staff and looking at them and going, we don't do this in Australia. We don't have to. It's not even in the consciousness that my 7-year-old last week had to do a drill at school where he had to hide under a table, and the kids weren't allowed to say to each other, shh, because that might attract the bad person.
That's what they call it, the bad person?
That's in that context, yeah. And I asked him, I said, who are you hiding from? Who do you think you're hiding from? And he said, someone that doesn't want to do good things and like who's bad. And to me, it's just like in Australia, I honestly was able to grow up feeling like, you know what? There are no bad people. There's people that have had bad experiences and need help, which is a much more compassionate way to see things. But when there's a gun presence, it forces you to think in terms of this other paradigm where it's just like, well, you know. But to me, like some dude who thinks that he needs a gun strapped to him, you know, because he's a white supremacist and he's fearful of people of color, you know, and he needs to go to Target to do his shopping but feels he needs to be armed. That's a bad person too. Like, like who's to say? Like that's why people just shouldn't have guns unless there's a checks and balances about it. You know, like a police force where they have uniforms and it's all like formal and like there's an actual process. And sure, bad shit goes down in the police force too. But if someone's going to have guns, okay, them. Not just some dude in the street who, I don't know what you're capable of.
Yes.
And that mentality to me, yeah. So with the kids, I do feel like sometimes saying that. And to be honest, where we live in LA, which is the more, you know, it's like Northeast LA, like very liberal, open-minded people and people that tend to have traveled, you know, more than other people in the US. And, you know, I do say that stuff to them and they're like, we get it 100%. And
yeah,
we're
of course
really ashamed of this shit and we're sick of it and we want it to change. And, you know, and a lot of this is being discussed now and, you know, the Democratic side of politics, you know, with Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, you know, they're talking about real change and I don't know if the rest of America is ready for it, but, you know, Northeast LA is, you know, this little bubble that we're in.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, definitely, I think about that a lot, for sure. It's a different place to Australia in a lot of ways. We think of it as being quite similar, but it's also fundamentally different in a lot of ways.
I was just back in Wellington for 5 days because my brother's just moved back there from London with his kids, and we had my mum's birthday. And I've ragged on that town many times. I lived there for 20 years and then I moved away and you pick on it and you say, oh, it's shit, blah, blah, blah. This is the first time I think that I've been back there and I finally just understood it. I'm like, I see. It feels so peaceful and tranquil.
Yeah.
Things aren't scary. You feel at peace. You feel like you leave your doors unlocked and it's just like it's easy to get everywhere. Yeah, the weather's shitty. Yeah. But this beautiful harbour and there's hills and everything.
Yeah.
And I felt the peace. I felt like that the ease of something like that.
Yeah.
And then you come back here and I love LA. It's always great to be here. But there is this sort of low level tension, I guess, just because you can always hear cars bustling around you or just, I don't know, there's just something about it, isn't there? And you get used to it. You block it out and it's fine. It doesn't mean anything, but it's just, it's fascinating like that.
I think for everything that you say about LA and the difference between LA and Melbourne and Sydney or any other city in Australia, you can find a contradiction. Like I can contradict everything you just said. I can find things in LA that would contradict what you just said. Yeah, of
course.
But I think you're right in a general kind of scope of it, and that's how I feel too. But then I think back to, you know, where I lived in Sydney in Redfern, and like at night, sometimes I'd actually be a bit fearful. And here at night, I just don't feel fearful. I don't know what it is. Like I just don't. You know, I haven't seen any fights, and in Australia, I would see a fight every week outside some pub or something like something.
Yeah, I feel.
You know what I mean? So there are these contradictions.
Yeah, you could get shot here,
but you can get shot. That's right.
Yeah,
and so
that's the difference. But you probably won't.
Yeah, no, you're right.
But you have more chance of getting in a fight.
What I put it down to in general is that in Australia, there's the basic trust between fellow humans is more trusting than here. People in the US just don't trust you if they don't know you, and there's this sort of basic thing of just
in these
like,
big cities anyway. I guess probably not so.
Yeah, much that's true. I'm making a big generalization, but that's my impression. That in Australia it's that mate thing, like calling everyone mate. it does. It's a signifier of something, like that. There's this potential for like, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You know, we know what's going on here.
Yes, of course.
We're all in the same little boat. But what's that expression? Familiarity breeds contempt.
Mm-hmm.
So Australians can be really contemptuous of each other. Behind the wheel, they're just like, you bloody arsehole, really aggressive.
Bloody,
but here it's like
a lot worse than that.
no one really screams at you.
Fucking
from behind you.
cunt! Like you'll hear that just
Yeah.
from pulling in front of someone.
You do that here, like you just don't do it.
No, you don't, do you?
No. So there are all these weird contradictions. You know what I mean?
It's very, very true.
Yeah.
Hey, you just put out the Airland Sea record.
Yeah.
I had to listen to it.
Oh,
Sounds
cool.
beautiful.
Thanks.
Yeah. When did you guys do that?
It's a project with two of my best friends, Lior and Nadav. We kind of grew up together. Lior and I started doing music together in our first bands and all that kind of stuff way back when we were like, 17. And yeah, so we just realized after all these years of being in music, we're like, why don't we do something together? And we started writing. And Lior had a fan. He's an artist, based in Melbourne, and he had a fan who had this beautiful country house out in Daylesford.
A fan of his.
Yeah,
And they let you go.
very wealthy family, and they let us use their house out in
Wow.
Daylesford, which is a beautiful part of Victoria.
That's like old school patronage style.
Yeah, it was a bit like that.
Yeah.
And good on them. Like, yeah,
That's
there's
great.
There's worse places to,
It's beautiful out in Dalesford.
Put your love. Yeah, it was so beautiful. So we'd sit there and we wrote a bunch of songs, and it was just the most beautiful but challenging process working with your best friends like that. Crazy. Insane. And we did that over years and years and years. Like it took like 6 years to.
And you would keep going back to the same place to write it?
We had a phase there, and then the next phase, those guys were coming. Well, Nadav lived in Sydney. I was living in Sydney, and Leo would come from Melbourne, and we'd work in my studio in Sydney, and we did a lot of it there. And then we came to LA, and we're like, okay, we need someone else to help to pull this together in terms of like, so we can just be the artist and let someone produce us. So we came out and did we recorded most of it at Henson Studios in LA with Justin Stanley, a good friend of mine.
Yeah, sure.
He's a great producer here. So we relinquished some of that to him, and we trusted him, which was great. And we had a good time. And so, yeah, we did an album.
And then what are you gonna push it to be the biggest band in the world now, right? You guys are gonna go on tour around the world everywhere.
Exactly not what you just said, yeah. So the whole thing was like,
Yeah, you're posting about it every single day on Instagram, right?
Yeah, all that.
You're all tweeting.
Yeah, we're totally
all combined. How's your marketing scheme?
Much to the annoyance of the people who've put it out. I think
they would have known that that's what they were getting, though, right?
Why aren't you like pushing this? It's just like, well, that's not what it was about, really. The intention of the project was really like, let's just get together and just make some music. At some point, this is where the challenge began, because at some point when you do that, usually you'll find that you realize, you don't actually make records just to sit there on the hard drive. You actually release them you make them to be released. You want people to hear them.
Yes.
And you want as many people as possible to hear them. And that's what happens. It's a natural, it just happens. And there's no commercial basis behind it. It's about, what are we doing this for? What is the meaning of this thing that we're doing? And I felt very deeply, and so did one of the other guys in the group, that it needed to be shared, and it needed to be shared, get out in the world. If not for just other people to hear, it was about us being able to relinquish it and let it go into the universe, and then you can move on. And that's what art is. At some point, you just got to let it go. Whether that means putting it in the shed out the back and never looking at it again, which I'm sure some artists do when they're painting or whatever.
Yes.
And others will send it to the gallery and sell it on and whatever. But I just needed it out in the world. And there was someone else in the group who felt differently, who was just like, no, it's just, I'm happy. That's it. We've done it. And I could not reconcile that.
Interesting.
Couldn't reconcile it. I was like, no, I need it to get out there to be able to move on.
Does that person have a bunch of their own music out there already, so that didn't really matter so much to them?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not
sure.
that it didn't matter, he was very fearful that it would.
Affect the reputation of what they already had.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And, my
interesting.
view is like, why do it if you're fearful of, whatever you do, you should just be like 100% behind it.
Yeah, I guess not everyone's like that.
That's right. True.
I was talking to some friends the other day. This is in a slightly different. It's a band from Wellington called the Phoenix Foundation. They're one of my favorite bands. I fucking love them. And they were saying how, to them, the most important thing has always been what comes out of the speakers, what the listener is hearing, and then him sort of going, I realize that, our image, what we wear on stage, how we're perceived, how much we're promoting, and all that has such a huge part of our success as well. But he just never really thought about it. They had a moment, where it was happening for them, and then I think they just, not that they weren't aware of it or whatever, but maybe they just didn't care. And he just said, yeah, it just kind of really affected the trajectory of our career. And I guess that sort of ties in a little bit. It's just like perception of what it is that you're doing. And
Right.
It's a funny one.
Yeah, it is a funny one.
I guess for someone like you being in a studio environment, that who you're producing and all of that means nothing to you. What they do once they sort of leave. I've noticed this with a lot of engineers and producers. Like, yeah, we try and make the music sound the best in the studio as we can, but what they look like in their press photos or whatever doesn't matter to us as the producer.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, but when it's not right, you can't help but feel like, oh, damn.
Of course.
I put my heart and soul into it. I made it.
Yeah, then you fucked up the release.
You want the release and the way they do it to equal the passion, the commitment, and the essence of what you've put into, and when it's like some like the worst like earnest video clip where they've really tried to make $1 million video clip for $5,000 to $1,000, it's just so disappointing. I can't deny that. It does disappoint me, even though it's not my role.
Yeah.
And if I get really close to an artist, I'll tell them, I'll say, look, in my opinion, I think you could do better on that, or what if you try this? And sometimes, to be honest, in the studio, we're talking about video clip ideas while we're making the song too.
Yeah, right.
And that feeds into it. Almost like it's like, wouldn't it be cool if like this? And then that kind of feeds into how the music is made too. And that's kind of cool. I think that
is very cool.
It can be really fun, and there's been projects where it's like thinking of a whole aesthetic while you're making it. And like, of course, like, there's plenty of producers out there that manage entire careers of artists. They're like executive producers of their careers,
Yeah, sure.
I've tried that with a few projects, but not pop stuff, like more like more esoteric stuff where I've got more involved, and it's always heartbreaking and difficult, and I try not to go there as much as possible. Can't do everything.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's it. I think that's sort of what I've got from certain producers where they're like, yeah, we would like them to have done something different, but sometimes you're just straight on to the next project and you can't even really think about how they're necessarily releasing it, or you wait a year before they put it out anyway. Then
That's right.
Sort of forgotten about it.
Yeah. Most of the time it feels great. You see it come out and you're like, oh, cool, it's coming out and it looks awesome and they've done a great job. But sometimes for sure you're just you feel a little deflated that, oh, God, that could have been done better. That's a shame.
Did you ever want to be the biggest artist in the world, being a rock band that was the most famous? Basically, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Because you had a band called the Bagsmen.
Yeah.
We've never spoken about this.
No, and before that they were called the Hive. We were called the Hive. And it's funny, the music isn't really out there in the world anymore. Like, we were pre-internet, kind of just on the cusp of it all. So it's
when
sort
is
of
this? Like late 90s, 2000? Yeah.
2000 to 2005 or something.
You did the circuit, the Aussie circuit?
We definitely did the Aussie circuit, Triple J feature album. We did like the Big Day Out 4 times. Like,
nice.
Here's all my passes from all the festivals that we did over the years. Like
that's what goes up.
You'll find Home Bake in there, like all the classics.
Yeah.
They're all here. Yeah, there's Home Bake right there.
Wow, cool.
What's this?
And this is with your good friends of yours?
Here's a Big Day Out from 2002.
Whoa, I reckon I would have been at the Big Day Out 2002. Who was playing that year?
I don't remember. Oh, at the drive-in, pretty sure.
Well, Mars Volta probably.
No, it was at the drive-in. I remember I didn't see Mars Volta, but I definitely saw at the drive-in
Yeah,
at
right.
Big Day Out. Maybe it was 2001.
Yeah, that sounds
And that
about
was
right.
incredible. There was that artist Peaches. She was always there.
Yeah, in the boiler room.
Yeah, and we opened the Boiler Room one year, which was the dance music tent, you know, EDM, you'd call it now, but back then that would
You
be
would.
like, what? You know, it was the dance music tent, and we opened it at 11 a.m., and it was quite funny because we're like, oh, no one's going to be there. So we're like sound checking. We got a sound check because we're the first band. That was cool.
Yeah.
Waiting off stage, and the doors opened, and literally 10,000 people just walked in.
Yeah.
It was insane, or whatever, 5,000.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Like, it was insane. It was like the kids are there when the gates open. It's like, come on, entertain me. And it was so awesome. So we did this great set, and then I went and ate breakfast. It was very surreal. So yeah, that band was my 10,000 hours, blah, 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 whatever. Like it was a great live band. Like we went super hard.
Do you miss being in a band like that? The camaraderie, getting to play shows in that way?
Yeah, I do miss. Yeah, I don't miss being the artist. I prefer being a sideman these days, but I like being a sideman where I can not just stand at the back of the stage. Like I love to get into it and perform. I'm a natural performer. Like I'll go, you know, in that band, it was like I was sort of a front guy, but playing bass. It sounds terrible, but like,
No, that's cool.
you know, I was like,
That's what I do in all the
I
colors.
moved
So
a
I'm
lot.
like, that's
Yeah.
cool, man.
Okay, cool. Yeah, but it wasn't like, you know, The Clash or something. It was like we were playing like drum and bass and dub and all that. It was awesome, and I'd do live dubs and like you know, I'd go very hard in terms of the effects and all that for the time, especially like now it's like everyone's got their massive effects pedal boards and shit.
Yeah, it's easier now.
Yeah.
With that.
But it was really energetic, and there were these build-ups that we would create. It was a very dynamic set where we'd do these, because it was kind of dance music orientated, we could do like 5-minute build-ups within tracks. And this is something I have to say that I'm missing in live music today, because so many bands are off track. Dynamics have tended to disappear from music and live music, so that you don't get these moments of ecstasy. And that's what our sets were all about, for me, about creating moments of ecstasy, where these build-ups would happen, where we would just sit on this one chord for a few minutes and just build until it is a cacophony of mess and chaos. And we had this method after years of being in this band and doing it, where at the end of the chaos, all I had to do was turn to the drummer and go 1.
You give them the fucking nod.
Just
eh? Yeah,
one.
Just the finger.
Because what 1 would mean is 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Bang,
drop.
we're in.
Bang.
Love
But
it.
all I would have to do is the 1. So you're not counting it and you're just going, I just literally raise my eyebrows like
Yep.
1. And no matter where you are in the chaos, out of the chaos would come order. And that is the ecstasy moment when the crowd would be like, oh, you know, when you drop, you know, it's like, boom, drop on the 1. I mean, it's the James Brown, the 1, you know, like it's the secret sauce. You can go anywhere. You can make a total mess as long as you finish it and bring it in on the 1.
It's funny when you've been in bands that do that. I'm always at live shows on the lookout for the guy who's given the eyebrow.
Yeah, right,
and then
right.
you'll see
right.
it, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, the bass player's the
Yeah.
guy who gives the eyebrow in this
Right,
band or this
right.
song, and you just
But what
see
the
them.
eyebrow represents is that, okay, we've gone off book.
Yeah. It's time to get
We're
back
no
in.
longer on the grid. We don't know what we're doing. We're in the space. We're childlike. We're
Yeah.
just exploring, and then we assert order again. And that is what is missing so much. There is no chaos when you're on click track.
Well, yeah, I guess
it.
the track is the same. You know, with Miami Horror, the track's the same every night, so we can't go off. You can noodle around within the script a little bit, but you always have to come in after those 16 bars. That's when the chorus comes in, because the fucking backing vocals and everything come in. And yeah, totally, I agree. It's like, and you get better and better within those constraints of making the
And
build
it's going to
up.
sound amazing. Like credit where credit's due. It's going to sound more full and more produced.
There's nothing. I believe that there's nothing like the magic of the humans without the track creating the music together. Not to say it's better necessarily than...
But I take it further than that and say, yes, it's that. Plus, there needs to be moments in the set where you're off book. As a musician, as a group of musicians, you don't know where you are.
Yeah.
You don't know where you're going, and you're fucking enjoying
then
that
the audience
feeling.
feels that as well, though. It suddenly becomes terrifying.
You just know it.
Yeah.
Audiences will leave,
It's exhilarating because they know that anything could happen, and if it could tumble, that's what gives you that extra, like, oh, fuck, this is dangerous.
That's right. Yeah.
And
it's letting a little bit, like, it's a God moment. Like, honestly, it's a little bit of that moment of just, like, being able to see something that's really kind of, like, spiritual and open. It's holy, it's God, whatever. It's the vibe. It's Marbo. But it's like...
For the Australians?
I honestly, like,
I
can
agree.
go to great shows that are like, most people like on Click and all that, and they're awesome. It's great. I like it, but I'm not sure you'll have that moment of ecstasy, of that rapture, whatever you want to call it.
No, you won't. And I remember the live acts that have done that, and the terrifying, like, tension that is when they would do that.
But I honestly believe any band can do it. It doesn't have to be some extreme,
of course not. No,
experimental band or something. It could be a pop act, it could be punk, it could be rock. Great rock bands, like, we're always doing that, and it was just like, my God, that was amazing. They took us there.
Yeah, I think it's just that maybe those are the bands more now that are off track, so that's why you still sort of see them as the ones that are doing it, because a lot of I guess if you were starting a new band now, you assume that there should be playback. Hey, that's kind of like very common for younger artists. To have that now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super common. I mean, it's not just common. From my experience of, a lot of artists assume that is what live music is.
Yeah.
So that they don't know the other thing. An example is an artist that I was playing with, that I was producing. I finished her record. It had come out. It was successful in Australia. And then she was launching it in Sydney, and she invited me to get up and play one of the songs that we wrote together. And the nerves in the band that there was someone else joining them on stage without a rehearsal, I mean, everyone was freaking out. I'm like, guys, it's okay. I've done this a million times. I'm going to play the song with you. And the panic wasn't that not trusting that I could do that. It's that they were on click. And that there is no room for derivation from anything. And that missing a beat, anything spontaneous will ruin the entire thing.
Yeah, if you don't start on the cue.
And that just taught me in that moment, I was like, oh, this is terrible what's happening in live music, because spontaneity has been... And I see it in the musicians' faces, man. They're not actually having as good a time.
No, you're leashed.
Yeah.
Like
leashed to the click. I mean, it's like... if you've experienced that feeling of just like really playing and not, and I...
Well, we have because when we grew up playing.
Yeah. And not to labor on the point, but like...
No,
I'm bringing that into the studio now too. I'm trying to use as little click as possible.
Right.
Even on music that should sound like it's to a click. I'm not talking about just really loose organic music. Like it could be really like pop or whatever, but like actually cutting tracks with no click.
Nice.
And it's amazing
really
because, well, you no longer, there's a psychological difference between being a group of musicians in a room waiting for a thing to go downbeat, let's go, to just being free and not even having to ask me, are we rolling? Because I always say to them, don't ever ask me if we're rolling, because that immediately puts everyone's minds in the room in a concentrated phase. I don't want anyone to be concentrating. Just want everyone to just be in the moment as if you're just jamming or rehearsing and making jokes, laughing, whatever, because that's when those moments that everyone talks about, how vibey was the first take, Well, you can make that first take happen every time if everyone feels that way and aren't counting things in and not being told, we're recording now, the red light's on, all that rubbish. If you remove it, and I always say to the drummer, don't ask me if we're recording. That's my job. I will make sure everything is captured. Don't worry. So all you need to do is play the song. I'll capture it. And once they understand that, everyone in the room will just be laughing, joking, and then someone will just start playing and the song will just happen. And it's crazy. It's the most beautiful thing.
Yeah.
It is so beautiful when it happens. And so many people, you'd be surprised, are very resistant to it. They're like, oh, don't we need a click? Don't we need... I'm just like...
Yeah, just because of the way we have been doing things, like the technology dictating the music, for
there's
sure.
a lot of anxiety around it.
Does this, does what a band is or are affect the way what elements you will put on their music in the studio, or in the studio? It doesn't really matter. They go, oh no, we can't possibly have synths because we don't have a synth player live. Do you sort of stay within the constraints of what a band should be? Don't let it get in the way of the music.
The thought process is more early in the project. I try and get a sense of who they are, and sometimes who they are will be a trio that need to sound on record like they do live, and that will mean no to minimal overdubs. But that will be because that's the essence that through our initial conversations or just even unspoken things, like that just seemed like, yeah, that's what it should be.
Yeah.
But then it just happens very naturally. Like I don't really need to dig too deep to understand what the scope of the instrumentation is going to be and how wide people want to go, because it's about scope. You can do everything. Especially today, I could go and arrange an orchestra on the computer.
That is the thing, yeah. You
can do it
now. You can
so it's
do
all there.
Everything.
Yeah, so it's all about limitations and scope. And the more limitations you place on a recording project, the better. Because the more creative you're actually going to be within. Like putting more things on things, like more instruments, is not being more creative. You know what I mean? It's like...
Well, I think a lot of people have, again, because of the technology, I think they do struggle with it because... the musical world is your oyster.
Yeah,
and
totally. Of course you struggle with it. Until you've spent years refining it down and just being like, oh, actually, I don't need, I did this project recently. It was an experimental project with a well-known experimental composer here in LA. And I didn't know his process. But I heard his music and I was always like, well, I actually don't know what I'm listening to in terms of how this was made. I can listen to most records and go, okay, I can see I can see even what mics they might have even used sometimes. Like I can just tell. With his music I was listening to, I just have no idea.
Who was this?
It's a guy called Josiah Steinbrick.
Yeah, I was here the day when he came in the morning before our session and he was playing us his new record. And with the sax guy that he'd been working with.
That's right.
That shit was,
Sam Gendel.
That was wild.
These guys are on another trip.
I remember being pretty blown away.
But I listened to that and I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Because I actually have no idea. I am as naive as someone who knows nothing about music listening to radio going, I just like it. I don't know why. I don't know what instruments there are on this. I just like it. And it could be just a rock band. I was like that. And it's so rare that happens, right? After making music for so many years, you think, you're just sort of pretty knowing about things. It's so great being put in a position where you're like, I have no idea. And then I was blessed to work with him, like we ended up doing a couple of things recently.
Cool.
And it's like, it was a really interesting process, man. Like, everything is like you have a source. So whatever it may be, it can be anything. It could be, someone clicking their fingers in a room, or it can be one synth note, or it can be like hitting a percussive instrument. And then that performance is then locked in and recorded, but then kind of ignored, in the sense that from that performance, you then send that performance to other pieces of gear, whatever it may be, whatever your palette is, whether it's a piece of outboard gear with EQ and compressors and filters, or whether it's to a synth filter. So you plug that sound into a synth and play the synth, but you're actually playing the source of music, still that initial performance.
Okay.
And then you record that. But then off that performance, you then send that to something else. Once you're two variables deep, you're in new territory. And I think that's a really good principle to understand in general in making art. Like, you need to go deeper than just the first performance sometimes to really mine originality. And his process really taught me a lot. We did one track, for instance, where he came in the morning and I played a chord on the Juno synthesizer, and I pressed a button on there called hold, which means that whatever you press, it'll just sustain forever until you press that button again. So I played a chord, pressed hold, and then I literally put the synth away. Didn't look at it for the rest of the day. 6 hours that chord was playing, and we were routing that chord through different pieces of gear, and we made a whole track out of that.
Wow.
But it took hours to find, okay, there it is. We know now. This is the thing. And it sounded nothing like the Juno chord. I mean, like, it could have been anything. But that's the beauty. What ends up being important is the process, not the source.
Do you want for inspiration? Do you find this difficult to find new things to do, or you always find ways to do something new or fresh and keep yourself invigorated?
Well, this is what I'm saying. Like, I always, like, there's parts of my career, like, and I think a lot of people feel this, where you think you're there, like, you know, and then it's about unlearning it and going, nah, there's always something new. And this process, I could apply that, what I just described to you, to a band. We could record the band, you know. And you think about The Cure, for instance, like their early records, like, yeah, if you look at them playing on TV, they're just a great rock band. Like their early days when they were really young, oh my God, like so good. They sounded so amazing just playing live on television. But you listen to their records, like the drums are not mic'd up in a traditional way. Like the mics are using these little contact mics and then sent to all these AMS reverbs and delays to create something. It's the same thing. It's like you do the initial performance, but then in terms of what people end up hearing is about the process. Like you go through some other process, and that's what the studio is all about. Like, you know, although sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes it's just about capturing something naturally. But so many people say, you know, in the engineering side of the world, they're like, they judge a piece of gear, like a preamp or a microphone or a compressor, by how transparent it is.
Okay.
In other words, how little of a stamp it places on what's happening in the room.
Yeah, sure.
And I just think that's complete folly, because I'm like, all recording, nothing's natural. It's a completely unnatural thing. It's a human invention, and we must embrace it for what it is and use that.
I think you were mentioning that about recording outside would be the truest because there's no reverb or whatever, right?
Yeah,
there's nothing
that's
from
true.
the sound
Yeah. That's a really interesting argument, like that's been made. I've heard before where recording outside is kind of like, okay, if you want to have less art, you know, of a human interaction in the artifacts of what you're hearing, like a designed acoustic space, record outside. There is no.
And when do you retire, Tony? When's it all done? When's enough? Do you see a point where is there still so much more you'd like to do? Does it ever end?
Well, there is no retiring because I don't have a job. Do you know what I mean? It's like, that's how I see it. It's like, I don't, forever I didn't say I'm going to work. I'm going to the studio. And yeah, it's work, and there is a work ethic, and you work hard and long hours, but I don't. Yeah, it's weird. I don't really see it as work and a job, but it kind of is. It's but there is no retirement from this one. It's as long as you feel inspired to make music, and it's about staying in that.
You've never not
mentality.
Felt inspired.
No, I have definitely. You know, and I think one of the things that kills that spark is anxiety. Like when you feel really anxious about other things in your life, that can really make it hard to feel great about coming into the studio and making music. So for me, managing anxiety is about is like a big part of the gig. So for me, it's like the anxiety of not knowing what I'm doing in 3 weeks often, or 4 weeks, you know, or longer, whatever, like just not knowing like what the future holds. But like, it's about trusting that, you know, work always comes around. Like it always has, it always will. So it's about trusting that, but managing that anxiety about like, oh, you know, what's going to happen? What am I doing?
Are you getting better at that?
I did, and then I kind of got shit at it again because I moved to a new country.
Oh, right. So it's been like this the last 3 years.
Well, no, not for the last 3 years, but like moving to a new country will mess you up. Like,
yeah, of course.
In terms of like what you think you know. And it challenges everything. And that's why you do it, because you're born again in so many ways. Like it's a renewal. And it really has been unbelievable. And now I finally feel like I'm entering some weird, amazing new creative space in the last bit.
Excellent.
If you ask, say, my wife or something, she'd say, no, you were always being creative. You were always there. You just didn't think it. And she's right, because I just didn't feel it. I felt too anxious to like feel like I was doing anything good. But if I look back to the first record I did in LA, it's some of my best work. But while I was doing it, I felt so anxious, you know. But honestly, it's bizarre. Like how you feel when you're doing stuff doesn't mean really.
Oh,
anything.
totally. I don't give a shit anymore. I mean, yeah, I want to always try and be feeling good, but
Yeah.
I agree with you. I've listened to things that I went, I was feeling terrible when I was making that.
Right.
But the art can still be, you can still be really proud of it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't really make any
I
difference.
kind of feel
does
that 50% of the time, actually. Like,
Yeah.
I'll finish a day thinking that it's just terrible, and the next morning I feel like, oh, it's awesome.
it? Yeah,
You know?
yeah, exactly.
It's just like this continual, and you never learn. Like, you just never.
No.
I personally, like, some things I'm learning, you know, anyway. I do have, like, just so many, all these processes I'm talking about creatively. I also have those in my life to just manage anxiety. So I walk in the room feeling really good and just ready to create. You know, exercise, obviously. You'll hear this from so many people who are involved in the creative arts. You know, exercise is a huge one, just to
You're very quite diligent
release
with that,
the
aren't you?
demons. Yeah, well, out of necessity, though. I'm not trying to be some fit dude.
No.
I just
I'm
do it.
becoming the same now
Yeah.
where I have to do it. Otherwise, yeah, I just go nuts.
Yeah, and it's just good for you anyway. Like, you know, it's a win-win with exercise. So,
Yeah. Final question
Yeah.
that I've been asking everyone. What song could you happily never hear again?
Whoa.
What song
Oh.
drives you a bit nuts? And
Okay,
you go,
there is
for
one song-
fuck's sake,
yeah.
when you hear it.
There's two, though.
Perfect.
They're hand in hand. It's
Yeah.
that song, It's Raining Men. And the other one is...
Who sings It's Raining Men?
And I Will Survive. Those two songs.
They do go very hand in hand. Are they both Gloria
I'm
Gaynor?
not saying they're like...
It's got
I don't
nothing to
know.
do that to say the song's bad. You just don't want to hear it again.
Honestly, I don't even know who the artists are. Like
Gloria
and I feel-
Gaynor sings I Will Survive.
Okay. Thank you for that.
It's
Thank you
Raining
for naming
Men. A lot of people sing that. I don't know who the
Right.
original,
Well, there
but
is
you
that original.
yeah, Jerry Halliwell from the Spice Girls did a version. That was her breakout
Wow.
single once she left
Yeah.
the Spiceys.
Forgive me for not knowing any of this because I've definitely closed my
Yeah.
brain to that development in music.
Yeah,
but
okay.
yeah, I don't know why those two songs really irk me.
They came to you very quickly as well.
Yeah, they're the ones. I can see a lot of redeeming things in the shittest music,
Yeah.
but those I'm done with them.
Perfect. Thanks, Tony. That's plenty.
I'm so sorry to all the people that love those songs.
No, who cares? Fuck them. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks, Tony. It was lovely to get to have a good sit down and a ramble. We obviously talk a lot when we're working together, but there's always so much to be done that we don't get to go into as much depth sometimes as would be nice, you know? I've included some links in the podcast description to some of Tony's work. Check out the new single by Harper Finn. He's another member of the fantastic New Zealand Finn dynasty. Tony's working on the forthcoming album by John Carroll Kirby, who is an absolute keys legend. John played on some stuff for my record and it was wild. It's incredible watching him play the piano and keyboards. He's just on a whole nother level. Tony produced the latest record for Irish songwriter Mick Flannery, which went to #1 in Ireland recently. That's very cool for him, for Tony, and the record's great. There's the latest record by Australian artist Montaigne that Tony produced. Yeah, Tony's a machine. He's always working on plenty of stuff. He co-wrote the forthcoming single for the band Low Moon, who I've had on the podcast, Sam Stewart. Plenty of good stuff coming out with Tony's stamp on it. So check him out on Instagram. Give him a follow. See what he's doing. I love what he's up to. All right. Geez, yeah, that'll do us. Thanks again for tuning in. Do me a favor and give the podcast a review and a follow and all that stuff if you haven't. I appreciate the support. Until the next one in a few weeks, see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Be safe and, I guess, keep smiling. I don't know. I look forward. It's a new decade. Hopefully some terrible parts of it, of the last one, are going to go away and there's going to be some cool new developments. Here's hoping, to a bright future. See you later.